Hey friends, we're talking about so many important things today. The first and foremost being election integrity. We can't have a constitutional republic if there's no trust in the system. And so we're going to talk about the SAVE Act that's being battled right now in Congress and the implications of that for us as we move forward. We're also going to talk about what I believe is the new term racism. It's Islamophobia. Anytime anybody speaks out against anything that we find disagreeable, we get these labels slapped on us. We're seeing this happen right now in New York City, where we just had a bomb thrown in the midst of a crowd. And if you complain that somebody's trying to kill you with a bomb, you're now evidently Islamophobic. Well, we're going to talk about all these things on our podcast today, and how if we don't figure out the proper understanding of religion in America, we're actually on a slow march toward the death of America. We need to recapture the First Amendment and the intent of our founders. We're going to talk about that in our podcast today.
Hey, welcome to the Ron Johnson Discipleship Podcast.
So glad you guys are with us again. We're excited to talk about a lot of important things. But before we talk about the important things, let's talk about some non-important things. First of all, March Madness is upon us. And I just wanted to give a big shout out to Roger Powell, the Rev over at Valparaiso University. Valpo had a great season. In fact, he's up for a National Coach of the Year award or something. Awesome. I saw, but I watched this game, and not on TV, but I don't know if it was on TV, but I couldn't get it, but I had it on my phone. But they took Bradley, I guess it was, to double overtime and ended up losing. But it was an amazing season, amazing game.
That was in the conference, right?
That was, that's right. That's what's going on now, conference championship. Yeah. So we'll be ready for our March Madness staff event every year when we fill out our brackets. And
bragging rights, right?
And all of us who actually think we know something about basketball lose to some of the ladies on our team who know nothing about sports and who pick the winner based on the color of their jersey or
the mascot.
How much they like the mascot. The coolness of the mascot, which shows you that's why that event to me is one of the best spectacles, true sports spectacles ever. Continues to amaze because nobody, it's so competitive. There really is no
one game, right?
One game, anything could happen, and there's always the upsets, and really. It is so hard to predict because there's just so many good teams and so much balance,
Anybody could have an amazing game and go for a run.
Or, the one thing about basketball, you could be shooting the lights out all year, but you just go cold for one game or for one half, and it costs you your whole season. So anyway, It's going to be a lot of fun. But I understand you were at the Y with one of your kids playing ball?
Yeah. One of my kids was playing basketball on, at their playoff game. This is the YMCA. He's 12, so it's not
okay.
12-year-old, but he get to experience the reverse of a last second winner. They were up 3 points, and then they had a turnover, and the opposite team shot a last second three at the buzzer, going to overtime.
It went in?
It went in.
Oh, my word.
And then my son's team ended up losing overtime. He fouled out. The other player fouled out.
Hey, I like that about your son, though. He fouled out. That means he's playing aggressively.
He's playing aggressive.
Right,
he played out of his mind that game because in the regular season, they lost to this team by 20 points. So we were actually up. And so we had a good chance of winning. And anyway.
Well, let me tell you.
Yeah.
And finish your thought.
Well, my point is everyone on the bench was just in tears, and because they feel really passionate. My son was frustrated, and I said, look, man, the pain you feel right now, it's so good because it forges that character in you right now to feel that level of loss, to process that correctly. I said, as you get older, you're going to be more resilient because of this.
I love this. So you made it a teachable moment. Now, let me just tell you, I was watching the 4-year-old league where my grandson's
I've been there,
playing. And there are no teachable moments. They don't even know what the game is. I mean, it was hilarious. One kid had a Spider-Man mask on his forehead up high, just like a headband.
Yeah.
And it was just total chaos. Nobody was guarding the 3-point line because no one can throw the ball up from that far away. So everybody's just piled underneath the basket. And one kid's just launching it up there and gets hitting kids off the head. And, they're like running around like, what do we do? What do we do? I mean, it was hilarious.
But there were a lot of parents and grandparents there.
There were a lot of parents and grandparents.
In fact, at that age, there are more parents there. And when you get to the higher level, there are actually very few parents there. So my point is the love for your kid has no correlation to the skill level. That's what I learned.
That's right. Greater love has no grandparent than to show up for your kids' bitty ball
3-year-old game when it's just chaos. They don't even know which basket to go towards. That's when I laugh when they run towards their own basket. I will give a quick shout out to Coach Powell, Roger Powell Jr. I went to a Valpo game a couple weeks ago. Play against Drake. It was a super exciting game. Last second 3-point win for Valparaiso. So in the right direction. Yeah, it was legitimate thrill. The best game I've been to. Kids were playing hard out. It was senior night. And at the very end, Coach Powell, he prayed with everybody, and then he honored his seniors, and he prayed with a microphone for all seniors. I mean, he was preaching the gospel. He was talking about Jesus Christ. He has his players share about their journey, and they talked about how God has blessed them. They honored Jesus. And it was like it was an amazing experience.
Yeah, he's the real deal. I love his passion for the Lord and just the way he infuses Christ and faith into everything. He's at a Christian university. That's the way it should be done. But it's not always, as not always done that way. But he's doing a phenomenal job, and I just applaud.
I was so impressed by him.
He's raising up godly men, which is really what coaching's all about. Basketball's just what they do on the side.
Well, when you're in college for basketball, I mean, your coach is like your biggest mentor. It's not even your professor; it's your coach. And the way he's impacting these young men is amazing. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right. Well, on a side note, that was the side note, I guess. Let's get into the meat of what's going on in our culture today, and do our best to attempt to approach this from a biblical Christian worldview. One thing that we've talked about here in past episodes is the whole notion of election integrity. If we cannot have a functioning constitutional republic, which is rooted in trust, by the way, you have to trust the system. You have to trust the people that are running. You have to believe that the system actually produces the results that are fair results. And so there's obviously been a huge push from this administration to clean up some things. And I'll just give you some examples. We had the whole deportation effort to take the 20 million or so illegal folks, many of them gang members, convicted criminals, et cetera, rapists, murderers, that the last administration just allowed to come walking into our borders. But interestingly enough, while this is just simply, as we talked about, this is just simply enforcing federal law, the left hates ICE. The left wants to defund ICE, wants to shut down ICE. And as I would point out, it's because the left doesn't want to see the deporting of their illegal voting base. This has been no surprise that Democrats in blue cities and Democrat elected officials in Congress have been pushing for this open border thing because it supports their power base. Then we saw at the beginning of this administration an attempt through DOJ to root out inefficiency and fraud and these kinds of things. No, you have to be an absolute moron as a taxpayer not to support the rooting out of fraud and government inefficiency and corruption, which is exactly what they were finding at a massive scale. But once again, the left hated DOJ because it caught payments to their illegal voting base. So it was all a big shell scheme. Not only were all these illegals getting taxpayer dollars at the harm of legal citizens, but we saw that this money was actually coming back to the politicians who were creating the whole mess in the first place. And so the left hates that because it was exposing basically their funding base. A lot of this U.S. aid and everything was going right back in the hands of the politicians who were creating all of this, and it made it look good. We're supporting all these poor people. We're supporting, AIDS research, blah, blah. There's so many of those great causes. But when you got to the details of it, you saw that very little of this money was going to whatever cause it was supposed to be going to. And so now the latest update from the left is they hate the Save America Act. They call it racist, bigoted, every kind of name you could come up with. But basically, the Save America Act is simply stopping their illegal base from voting in American elections. And I mean, we have touched on this, but I can't imagine going to Russia, for instance, or going to Iran and sneaking in the country illegally, and then expecting for the government to support me financially. And I have the privilege of voting in an election of which I'm not even a citizen of that country. I mean, this is absolutely insane to apply to any other situation globally. And yet we have the Democrats in America who are suggesting somehow this is a racist thing, or that, I saw where Dick Durbin from Illinois was suggesting that Trump was trying to rig all future elections so that he would win. And I'm thinking, that's exactly what you are doing. We're just trying to come up with only citizens, can vote for this. And so Trump's playing hardball, and I don't know what your thoughts are on it, but the latest headlines was that Trump threatens to not sign any new legislation until the Senate passes the Save America Act. What do you think about that? I mean, he's starting to play hardball on this thing.
I don't have a lot of thoughts. I have some thoughts on it. My understanding is what this is requiring is ID for voting.
So this is, I'll highlight that.
Ahead,
So the key provisions that are included, Trump's saying, I don't want a watered down version. Here's what he wants. Mandatory photo ID, which is on a whole bunch of other normal things that we have to do every day. So this is not a big, stretch. Proof of citizenship when you register. So you have to show that you're actually a citizen of the United States. And then getting rid of these mail-in ballots, except in very few circumstances. That was abused. We saw all these illegal ballots dumped in. This was when Biden supposedly set a record for the most Americans voting for Joe Biden, which, again, we saw that has been proven that election was stolen, even though we were called all kinds of terrible names. But that election was stolen, largely because of this mail-in ballots. And then amendments barring biological males from competing in girls' sports, and halting gender transition procedures from being carried out on children. I mean, again, what is so radical about any of these provisions? And he also points out, see what you have to say on this, 80% of American voters support election integrity provisions of the Save America Act. And Scott Presler asked this question. He was being interviewed on Fox News. When in American history have 84% of Americans ever come together on any issue before? And he noted that even 76% of black voters, 82% of Hispanic voters, 85% of white voters, and 95% of Republican voters, and 76% of Democrats support this. So this is like the biggest bipartisan no-brainer in the history of bipartisan no-brainers.
Those percentage supports, I think, ID when you vote, voter ID. Like, you have to have your ID when you vote. Because I know there are a lot of places in California, for example, that not only do you not need the ID, you're not even allowed to show your ID or something like that.
Right. So photo ID and proof of citizenship.
Which, to me, I don't know about support for all those things there from the Democrats, but I think the common sense is the common sense to say, hey, when I go vote, I whip out my ID. When I go to the BMV, I whip out my ID. If I ever, in fact,
you can't even get your driver's license now because they're having what's that new driver's license? You have to have like proof of a whole bunch of things, and if you don't have all that documentation, they send you home. I mean, that's just to be able to travel.
If I need to register an account on Robinhood, I gotta have my ID. I gotta have them take a picture of my ID. I mean, there's you gotta go. Alcohol, cigarettes, or fly. Like, you need your ID for all those different things. But for voting, we don't need our ID, right? So,
and just to remind everybody, the same people that are against these voter IDs are the same people who wanted us to have a vaccine passport to be able to travel anywhere. When we're pushing all the vaccination nonsense. So, I mean, this is not about fairness or whatever. This is purely about retaining power, and those in power understand that this is about keeping their illegal base in place.
I think the mail-in ballot is also very interesting because every state has such different regulations. Now, I don't know how this stuff works, like legally. My understanding is for your state elections, maybe the state's right to determine the governor. You want to have your mail-in ballot, you want to have your whatever. I believe this thing, my understanding is on federal elections, you have to conform to federal laws in terms of what the election looks like. Which, again, state rights versus federalism. But I just think with the introduction of, now we kind of normalize mail-in vote. I feel really weird using mail. I've never used it. I would rather go and wait in line and push the button myself to feel like I voted. Even when I push the button, sometimes I'm like,
well, I've even heard it brought up, and I'm sure there's merits on both sides, but that we have, on election day, that it's like a holiday in the sense that everybody is off work. There's no excuses for not being able to get in to vote. And you go in person and you vote. And again, this is not such a outlandish thing. We all have voting places many times within walking distance in our own neighborhoods. This certainly would not inhibit people from voting. And again, there's rare exceptions when people can turn in a mail-in ballot. But the point is, this has been radically abused by the left. There's been all kinds of voter fraud. We even saw in Georgia that was confirmed that there was voter fraud. So, we have to stop. That's the whole point. Any American who cares about this country should want to stop fraud. And this has been a massive area of fraud. So I'm for tightening up all of this so that we get an accurate reflection of who's representing us. And I don't know that we have had that for a long time. So anyway, that's that. We all know Texas is a massive battleground state. There's a lot of electoral college votes there in Texas, and it's been targeted by the left, trying to flip it from red to blue. And so we just had the primary there between Democratic Texas State Rep James Tallarico, who I'm embarrassed to say is also a pastor. But not a pastor like we're used to having pastors. But anyway, he just defeated another scary candidate, Jasmine Crockett. And I think we've all seen Jasmine. She doesn't really have much she's running on, but she sure likes to say things that are quite explosive and rude. I had a whole list of them. I won't go into them, but let's just say she was a powder keg. They were concerned with her marketability on the across the board if she was too radical, and I think she would have been. I think she was very, very polarizing. In fact, her response to the fact that she's polarizing was also polarizing, which I thought was funny. Even her trying to explain that she's not polarizing was very polarizing in the way that she said it. But this Tallarico guy, he's 36 years old, very young. He was trained in a very liberal Presbyterian Theological Seminary, Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary. He's railing against people like us, whom he calls Christian nationalists. While this is his biblical punchline here, he wants to flip the tables of injustice and the halls of power, just like Jesus did. Of course, what's coming out is a lot of his very heretical teachings and beliefs, which this author says reveals a deeper, long-festering spiritual rot in mainline Protestant churches and seminaries. We've talked about wokeness. We've talked about the abandonment of Scripture and all of these things, basically caving into whatever the cultural pressure is. But, I'll go through this quickly. Jesus was a feminist. He's citing the heretical gospel of Thomas, which, if you all know, is not in your Bible. It was left out by church fathers because it was not viewed to be authentic or inspired. One of the early church fathers, Eusebius, called it absurd, impious, and heretical fiction. So that's that. He's a big abortion advocate. He says abortion for our neighbors with a uterus, and he actually ties a woman's choice to Mary's embracing of the fact that she was going to carry Christ, and that every woman has to have a choice whether or not to continue their pregnancy. So we could get into a lot of quotes there, but he rejects the idea of embryonic personhood. So when we would say when a sperm and egg come together and there's conception, you have a human being that is, sacred, made in the image and likeness of God. He rejects that. He said he likens aborted babies in the first trimester to extracted teeth, if that's not disgusting. So it's just like pulling a tooth. Murdering a baby in the first trimester is like pulling a tooth. His church was one of 33 churches to be designated reproductive freedom congregations in the state of Texas that proudly proclaim abortion as a moral and social good. We find out God is a non-binary, so now he's got all the transgender ideology twisted into God's blessing. And this is interesting, too. He's one of these guys that is ashamed of being white. The never-ending process of reckoning with his whiteness. And so he calls whiteness a virus that kills our black neighbors. So he's checking all the boxes for the progressive left. He says atheists are more Christ-like than Christians. Obviously, he's coming from a universalist theology here. He says, I quote, all religions contain the same truth as Christianity, and that while he believes Christianity points to the truth, he also believes other religions of love point to the same truth. This is some really, really dangerous stuff here. And when he talks about it's time to start flipping the tables, now he's playing into the whole leftist violence that somehow co-opts Jesus as the progressive leftist reformer who's now turning the tables of power. And of course, the fact that Jesus flipped the tables is a sign now for those on the left that they can employ violent tactics. I'm grateful that Jasmine Crockett's political career has been, put to rest. She did nothing for our nation, but caused division.
She's going to show up on a talk show. But anyways.
Yeah. She'll go around and blather on the talk shows. But this guy's even more dangerous because for the theologically inept, he baptizes Jesus in progressive leftist Democrat ideology, and again, because we have many people in our churches who are not being discipled and who are not applying biblical worldview to these issues, he's a scary candidate. And I think there'd be a lot of money that flows into his coffers because those who are looking for a change of power in the state of Texas will get behind a person like that who is white but says all the right things on the left and then brings Jesus into it to baptize it, and a non-binary God to support all the LGBT stuff. So this is the wokeness that we're talking about fighting, and not that we want to get into him. I just brought him up as an example. But I was reading. I guess I was sharing with you. I want to kind of talk about this. What I think is a horrific misinterpretation of our founding documents. I just had. I'll give an example. A case in point. Our Lieutenant Governor, Micah Beckwith, was sharing that our Governor, Braun, had come out with basically a new partnership, encouraging faith-based organizations to partner with our state government. He says here, Indiana has long benefited from the strength, the generosity, and commitment of its faith-based institutions, and these organizations have served as cornerstones of community life since our state's founding by offering mentorship, compassion, hands-on support to neighbors in need. And he says the creation of this faith-based institutions initiative recognizes this legacy and seeks to strengthen it. Now, I don't know who would have a problem with that, but I'll tell you what, as soon as you post something like that on social media and you look at the comments, I mean, people are unhinged. They're just out of control. The first thing that they start bringing up is, when are you guys going to figure out separation of church and state. Now, we've highlighted this on previous podcasts. It was, spheres. Help me, Jesus.
Spheres of
Abraham Kuyper. Abraham Kuyper. There's coming. Abraham Kuyper. He talked about the three spheres of God's
authority, or
So you got the family, you've got the church, and you've got the state. People erroneously suggest that the church and state are separate in terms of God needs to be kept out of government, or every religion needs to have an equal place at the table, which is a perversion of this biblical doctrine of the institutions God created, because it suggests that the family, the church, and the state are not all under the authority of God. And if you ask which God, it's very clear that when you go back to our founding fathers and you go back to the founding of this nation, while they were against the promotion of any single Christian denomination, like America was not going to be Presbyterian or Catholic or Baptist, they prohibited that, but they did not prohibit the fact that America was a Christian nation. So this idea that somehow we're dealing with this right now, a push in heavily Islamic areas for Sharia law in America. That would have been unthinkable to our founders, because America is not a Muslim nation. America is a Christian nation. It is our Christianity that allows our Muslim neighbors or Hindu neighbors or Buddhist neighbors or whatever the world religion is, allows them to come into our country, but it does not allow them, for instance, to shut down the streets of New York City for public prayer, Muslim prayer, 3 times a day, and shut everything down. That would have been inconceivable to our founders. Now, I would be called a religious bigot for saying this, but we've talked about this. You have to have a worldview that is the basis of your nation, or you have no social cohesiveness. You have no nation, because a nation has to be rallied around a certain ideology or a certain worldview that holds it together. Otherwise, it just blows apart, and you end up having war. You end up having battles between people who just simply do not share the same worldview. And so, what we're watching now is the left is taking advantage of a misinterpretation of our First Amendment to use the First Amendment against us. And so as soon as you say, no, we are not supporting Muslim ideology in terms of our government, now you're an Islamophobist, or whatever the word is, Islamophobic. I think Islamophobia is now the new racism in America, because as soon as you push back on these things, that's what you get slapped in the face with. We had that happen here at Living Stones simply because, somebody found out we were going to host a TPUSA event, and now we're Christian nationalists, and now, we're bigots, and, all this kind of ridiculous talk. But they will use that to silence us. They will use that to simply get us to self-censor. And I guess I'm making a plea here today that if Christians don't wake up and recover these founding principles in our nation, like we're in a very slow death march in the West. We're already seeing it in Europe. Obviously, we need a revival spiritually, but we need a revival that actually leads to reformation, and we need to get back to the foundational principles, or else we're going to lose it all. And that's my burden. We've had a respite here of with this last election. I can't imagine what would have happened if we were under a Kamala Harris and Tim Walz administration right now. Thank God for His mercy on our country, but we've got to get this right, because we're getting our brains beat out. We're seeing it happen in right now in New York City. I'll say one other thing. I'll let you jump in here. We just had a protest in New York City from people who are simply saying, stop the Islamic takeover of the city. Now, free speech allows us to wave a flag and say what's going on in New York should be a cause for alarm. While this protest was going on, or I guess we call it a protest, we had 2 Muslim young men who threw a bomb into the midst of the protest. Fortunately, the bomb did not detonate. They're investigating these guys now and finding out that they may have ties to some, radical Islamic groups. But this is what I'm talking about. This is the disturbing nature of our media, who simply cannot call something evil. ABC's Good Morning America says the Islamists hurling IEDs on Saturday in New York City did so during, quote, the chaotic dueling protests that were started by a far-right provocateur, Jake Lang, under the banner, Stop the Islamic Takeover of New York City. The mayor, who we know is a Muslim, said that the protest was rooted in bigotry and racism. So there we have it again. As soon as you protest their perverted ideology, you're branded with names. But what followed, Mamdani called criminal and reprehensible. Unlike CBS and NBC, ABC conceded that the men told investigators they had watched ISIS propaganda videos and they were there to defend Muslims. So only one channel had the courage to actually mention that little fact. Everybody else just covers it up because, God forbid, we want someone to call us, that we're guilty of Islamophobia. But this is the kind of stuff that is destroying our country simply because we will not look at what Islam teaches in the face and say this is evil or this is wicked. I mean, we're talking about things like, Islam teaches that every woman who's an infidel must be raped before she is assassinated or before she's executed, because otherwise she'll go to heaven. So you have to rape her and then kill her under Islamic law. We talk about child brides and things like this. I mean, when you get into the details of Islam, it is a perverted and wicked thing that has nothing to do with what we believe in the West, and yet nobody in power wants to take it on or say it because of pressure. And then they baptize it under the First Amendment if we don't embrace all of this perversion as something that our founders had in mind. And I'm just saying, this is not what our founders had in mind. And we need to start screaming that from the rooftops, even though that will be incredibly unpopular. And I'll get called all kinds of names for that. But it's true. And we've got to open our mouths and speak. So I did a lot of talking there.
Yeah, there's a lot there. I mean, I don't have that much more to add. You put it very well. I think, just to remind our viewer, separation of church and state is not in the Constitution. It's not in the Declaration of Independence. There's nothing. It's a letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote to a church to reassure the church. He was speaking to a Danbury Baptist church. He was talking to a church.
No religion was going to persecute the Danbury Baptists, that we were not going to promote one Christian religion above another Christian religion. But I want to emphasize the Christian part.
I don't know how many times I've talked to people, Christians even, they're like, oh, separation of church and state is not in the Constitution. It's like, no, it's not in the Constitution. If you want to look at personal letters, there's tons of personal letters by the founding fathers. If you put them on the same level of the Constitution, which you shouldn't, there's tons of letters written by founding fathers that talks about the importance of religion, that talks about the importance of morality, talks about importance. So just take that out of the equation. That's just like a random letter, not random letter. It's just a letter that someone wrote, that Thomas Jefferson wrote, among many other letters he wrote. But the Bill of Rights talks about the government should not establish a religion. So you look through the lens of what is establishing a religion. What is it? Like establishing Sharia law will be the example of establishing a religion. To be affiliated, to promote a certain religious view and acts is something that laws are engineered to do. You cannot create a law without some underlining worldview or religious or philosophical meaning behind it. So to say, well, your law has to be devoid of all religion and only attack Christians, it's just a fraud because every law has religious views, religious perspective. When you want to put the LGBT flag in front of every consulate in the world, every United States consulate all over the world, you are promoting a religion. You are promoting a worldview. You're promoting a perspective.
Right.
But you don't call that religious.
Exactly.
So this is where people
you don't quote separation of church and state on those. It is only quoted when Christians start getting involved in the system. And I just want to say, we have a midterm coming up. I want to encourage everybody listening, make sure you're registered to vote, make sure you do your homework, and get out there and vote for the best candidate. We've got some really, really good candidates that are running. We're going to actually host a candidates forum here, which again is something I think churches should be doing all across America. Let's get people together. Let's hear what the candidates stand for. What is their worldview? What are their policy implications of that worldview? And let's vote for the best people. There's nothing like wrong with this behavior. There's nothing illegal about this behavior. Churches should be doing this all over America. And we should also be raising up good candidates who understand the purpose of government and who are rooted in good theology, not like the knucklehead from Texas, but rooted in solid biblical truth, because we believe, again, the government is for the good of the people and for the glory of God. And when those two things are kept in tension, good things happen. So let's have God-honoring, God-glorifying government, and all people under that government will experience the blessing of the Lord. So anyway, we talked about a lot of important things today. I wish we had more time. There was an interesting article that came out on the Family Research Council's page, Should Christians Influence Politics? Maybe we can get into that next week, because there's a lot of things we could talk about there. But anyway, we always seem to run out of time. This is kind of like Sunday morning. I'm always running out of time, and I'm just going to blame you. I'm going to blame you for that, or Matthew. Maybe Matthew needs to make this podcast longer. But anyway, I will say this. We're leaving from here to go to a really, really exciting meeting to talk about what we can do to kind of take our game to the next level in terms of outreach, impact, in terms of the podcast and a host of other social media tools that we're using here at Livingstone. So really, really excited about this. I'll probably be sharing more later. But anyway, it's going to be a great afternoon, and I'm excited. Jesus is on his throne. His kingdom endures forever. We're part of a movement that's going to win, and it's just good to be a part of it. So awesome. Love you guys. Thanks for tuning in. We'll look forward to seeing you next week.